Hi, today I'm asking you to think about some of the different models of resistance to slavery that we have learned about so far. Yesterday you watched video about Abdul Rahman, who was an African prince from Timbuktu, enslaved and forcibly taken to the United States, where he had a family and lived out most of his life before he finally made it back home. That's not a story that many people know about. I think it's really powerful and interesting. And if you consider his modes of resistance to slavery, they included working very hard and proving that he was a valuable person through his work, his labor, his family, and a lot of what we would consider really conventional methods today of proving that you're a man. Nat Turner, who is a true historical figure, and the film Birth of a Nation is quite historically accurate, chose another path of resistance to slavery. Like Rahman, he was a religious man, he was a hard worker, he was very intelligent, and he was noble. Yet he, like the founding fathers, Patrick Henry, who said, "Give us liberty or give us death," chose to fight for his freedom and try to end slavery with God at his side, using divine justice. So those are two different modes of resistance to slavery to consider. And later this week, I'll ask you to think about that in the discussion board in a more structured assignment. So think about the characters who are real people that we've met thus far. Nat Turner, Abdul Rahman, and I am going to introduce you today to John Marrant, who was born a free man in New York in the 1700s, but lived in South Carolina for an important part of his life. Also, North Carolinian Harriet Jacobs, who was born in North Carolina, but actually lived in New York State when she escaped from slavery. They never met because Marrant died before Harriet Jacobs was born. Yet, thinking about the amount of movement that is part of the resistance and struggle against slavery. Jacobs running away to escape slavery. Nat Turner starting an insurrection and trying to move toward the sea because his ultimate goal was to sail away from the United States. Abdul Rahman's goal being to sail back to Africa. David Walker's goal being to move and travel freely to speak out against slavery. These are all modes of resistance that involve movement and travel. So John Marrant did not move to South Carolina to try to end slavery, but he certainly engaged in a lot of movement in his life. He moved from New York to South Carolina as a young child. He moved through South Carolina seeking God. He moved as a preacher during the Revolutionary War and eventually moved up to Canada, where many African Americans who fought in the American Revolution were trying to obtain their own land. And eventually, John Marrant never made it, but many black revolutionary soldiers had as their goal to move back to Africa, kind of like Rahman, even though most of the Revolutionary War soldiers had never been to Africa. They still thought of it as a home. So again, modes of resistance, movement, thinking about Africa as a home. Excuse me, I have some very naughty children here.
Hello. Can I talk to you?
Would you like a timeout?
Can I talk to her?
No, thank you. I'm trying to tell them the important things they know for the homework, so you need to be quiet. So please excuse the giggling and the commercial interruption. There are two 2 3/4-year-olds here who are supposed to be taking a nap and who are going to be in timeout soon if they don't lay down and take their nap while Mommy does her work. So this is just a brief look at the June 5th folder, yesterday's folder, and I'm going to switch over to today's folders.
Only water.
Sorry, my computer's going really slowly here. I'm switching over to June 6th to the folder about John Marrant, and I'm going to quickly tell you a little bit about John Marrant, but the bulk of this work asks you to read about Marrant, and there are two main documents that you will be able to view. The first is John Marrant's narrative. Narrative simply means one's true life story, or any kind of story that one tells. John Marrant also became a preacher, so this is an archival copy from a sermon by John Marrant. So first, a look at the narrative and some of the important moments in the narrative. Before I ask you to try to read it on your own, I'll just go over some of the important points with you. It's a document from the 1700s, so it might not be, the best read. John Marrant, as it says, born in 1755 in New York, and he's telling his story not so much to tell the story that Harriet Jacobs or Frederick Douglass will tell because they were enslaved, because John Marrant was not enslaved. He was born free. But he tells his story as a spiritual narrative rather than a slave narrative. However, for Nat Turner, who didn't get to tell his own story, his story was published as Confessions by a man named Gray. Harriet Jacobs' story and Frederick Douglass's story are known as slave narratives. I'm sorry, we need to have a timeout.
No. I don't want him to come out.
Mommy is talking to her students. That's enough, thank you. Okay, again, pardon the interruption. Marrant born in New York, as you can see.
What?
I don't know where it is. How about nobody has any toys? Or you're going to have a timeout.
What my toy?
This is a spiritual narrative, so he talks about the gracious dealings of the Lord that will help him. He publishes it with the goal of helping others to understand how the Lord can intervene in your lives. And he says, if you can understand my life by these removes, meaning by the various moves he made in his life in different places that he lived. Please forgive me. I am going to have to pause this video right now because some people need a timeout.
No.
And then I will tell you in a very brief next video a little bit about John Marrant.
I want you to